let's talk about a really weird glitch in our brains. It's the psychological trap that keeps us stuck in jobs, relationships, and projects that are just kind of mediocre. And it does this for years. It's a paradox that shows us that sometimes a truly awful situation is actually way better for you than one that's just good enough. Okay, so I've got to ask you this. Just think about it for a second. You've got two job offers on the table. One is, it's stable, but it is mind-numbingly boring. The other one, it's a complete soul-crushing nightmare. Which one are you actually going to quit? Now, you'd think the answer is obvious, right? Of course you'd quit the toxic one faster, but if you think you're more likely to eventually leave the boring job just because it's kind of unpleasant, well, that's where our common sense totally fails us. The real trap isn't the disaster, it's the meh. It's the good enough. Yeah. A flat-out disaster, like shattering your leg, it forces you to act. You're going to the hospital, you're getting a cast, you're dealing with it. But a mild annoyance, like a trick knee that only flares up now and then, you could complain about that for 20 years and never do a single thing about it. And it turns out the exact same logic applies to our careers, our relationships, everything. So how does this actually work in our heads? Well, it all comes back to this really brilliant thought experiment about a daily commute. And that's actually where this whole paradox gets its name. The official term is the region beta paradox. It was coined by Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert, who figured out that our brains are basically wired to solve big, intense problems way more effectively than those little, nagging ones. Gilbert explains it with this incredibly simple scenario. Just imagine you have one rule for getting around. If your destination is less than a mile away, you have to walk. But if it's more than a mile, you get to ride your bike. Simple, right? Now, let's look at the math. A destination that's just under a mile away. Gilbert calls this region alpha. Well, that forces you to walk, and it takes you 16 minutes. But a destination that's a little bit farther, in region beta, say 1.2 miles away, that triggers a faster mode of transport, the bike, and you get there in just 5 minutes. So wait a minute. The worse situation, the longer distance, leads to a better, faster outcome? And this just perfectly illustrates the entire concept. The bike here is just a metaphor for your brain's powerful problem-solving machinery kicking into high gear. That longer distance, that more intense pain, is what forces you to get on the bike in the first place. Mild problems, they just keep you stuck walking. Okay, so why are we built this way? Why don't we just get on the bike for every single problem we have? Well, the answer is in something called your psychological immune system. It works just like your physical immune system, which fights off germs. Your psychological immune system fights off misery. It's this incredible defense mechanism that helps you feel better about bad situations, basically by just changing how you think about them. And you've definitely seen its classic moves. You've got rationalization, where you tell yourself, well, the pay isn't great, but at least my commute is short. Or restructuring, when you get fired and you immediately reframe it as, you know what, this is the fresh start I needed. These are all just powerful mental tricks our brain uses to keep us happy. But here is the catch, and it is a huge one. This system, it's not always on. It takes a ton of mental energy to run, so your brain only fires it up for the big emergencies. It needs a certain threshold of pain to even boot up. This chart makes it super clear. A severe insult, a real disaster, that pushes your distress level way up, and boom, the immune system kicks in to protect you. You start thinking, that person's a jerk, their opinion means nothing. But a mild insult? It just flies under the radar. It's not painful enough to trigger the big defenses, so it just sits there, and you end up stewing on it for days. Okay, so let's get practical. This isn't just some fun psychological theory. This paradox creates some incredibly dangerous traps in our actual lives, every single day. This is the classic scenario. The job is fine. The pay is okay. It's not terrible, but that mild, low-grade dissatisfaction never ever crosses the threshold needed to make you act. So you stay. And then 5 years go by, you look up and realize you haven't learned a single new thing, and that comfortable job has quietly become a dead end. A horribly toxic job? That would have forced you out in 6 months, probably into something way better. And this applies to businesses too. A catastrophic bug that crashes the entire website, that's an all-hands-on-deck emergency. It gets fixed immediately. But a page that loads, say, 2 seconds too slow, that's just a mild annoyance. So it gets put on the back burner, ignored for years, all while it's slowly bleeding customers and killing the business. The small problem becomes the silent killer. And check this out. This is a really counterintuitive one for managers. A truly incompetent F-grade employee, they get fired, and they get fired quickly. Problem solved. But what about a mediocre B-minus employee? They're not bad enough to fire, so they stay, taking up a seat where a rock star A player could be, and they quietly drag down the entire team's performance, sometimes for years. Okay, so this is a pretty bleak picture. How do we get out of this trap? The key is to stop waiting for a disaster to happen and learn how to artificially trigger yourself into action. Here are 3 strategies to do just that. First up, set tripwires. Don't rely on some vague feeling like, oh, I'll leave when it gets unbearable. What does that even mean? Instead, create a hard, measurable rule, a specific deadline. For example, if I don't get a promotion by December 31st, then on January 1st, I start applying for new jobs. No excuses. If the condition is met, action becomes non-negotiable. You're basically turning a mild problem into your own personal fire alarm. Second, if you can't make the situation better, consciously make it worse for yourself. You need to manufacture discomfort. If you're procrastinating on something, don't just set a private deadline. Announce it publicly. Tell your friends. Post it on social media. The potential for public humiliation raises the stakes from a mild annoyance to a social disaster, and that will force your brain to get on the bike. And finally, this is maybe the most powerful strategy of them all, the zero-based audit. You just have to ask yourself one brutally honest question about any major commitment in your life. Knowing everything you know right now, if you weren't already in this job, would you apply for it today? And if that answer is a clear no, well, there's your signal. That tells you that the only reason you're staying is because the mild discomfort of staying feels easier than the effort of leaving. You are living in region beta. So when you boil it all down, the real takeaway is this. We spend our lives terrified of big, sudden disasters. But maybe the real danger is the slow, quiet creep of good enough. Because disasters are a call to action. Mildness is just a sedative. And that leaves us with one last thought to take away with you. Take a look at your own career, your projects, your life. What's the one thing that you tolerate day in and day out simply because it's not quite broken enough to demand your full attention? That's your region beta. And that, right there, might just be the most dangerous place you can be.